Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mind Matters, navigating head injuries and concussions. We're joined again today by one of our most senior seasoned attorneys, Thomas Ozbolt. He's part of our concussion and brain injury group. And today we're going to pick up that conversation we had in part two, where we talked about traumatic brain injuries and started getting into some of the things like delayed neurological complications, vascular disorders, that sort of thing. So we'll pick up where we left off, Thomas. Let's kind of take it where we were and talk about some real life cases. Can you provide for our listeners some examples of maybe how these conditions that we talked about in the last episode might have been diagnosed and treated?
Yeah, let's talk about some examples of how they may turn up in practice in real life examples. So, you got a person who's involved in a minor car crash. They walk away feeling fine. Hey, yeah, I'm good. Please show up. No injury reported on the scene. They walk away feeling fine, but then they start experiencing severe headaches and vision problems a few days later. And let's take this to be like a 24-year-old male with no prior history of anything in his life. So severe headaches, vision problems a few days later. They go to the hospital. CTA scan reveals arterial dissection. So the doctors in that instance might immediately start treatment to prevent a stroke. And in that case, the person would recover after a period of rehabilitation, hopefully. In another case, you got a young athlete. Let's say, they hit their head during a game. They go up for a rebound. Somebody cheap shots them on undercuts, boxing them out, takes their legs out, and they come down hard on their head. So, it might pop up, have no immediate or obvious signs of injury, but later, again, severe headaches, dizziness. When they go home that night, maybe some vomiting. A scan shows a traumatic aneurysm. So in that instance, the medical team presumably would perform surgery to repair that aneurysm, which prevent potentially fatal rupture in their brain.
That's pretty terrifying. And so, when I hear you talking about things like that, I'm thinking about, a car crash or, impact sports, violent sports. Those are kind of, okay, that makes sense where you get a TBI. I've seen though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but things like yoga. I mean, I'm not ashamed. I've done yoga before. It's great for the core, great for balance, great for flexibility. I know maybe some of our audience may participate in that, but even something like yoga, as gentle as yoga would be, can lead to an arterial dissection. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, this is absolutely wild. It's I saw this and it made me think about I think it's a Warrior 3 where you're bending your neck back and reaching over your head. Yeah, I mean, I've done yoga, feel great after you do it. Yeah. But yoga, some individuals, maybe those ones we talked about with Marfan's, or maybe some other underlying conditions that they've lived with, and might predispose them to arterial dissections. So these could happen with activities that would involve sudden or intense neck movements, like yoga. Like I said, those different poses and postures that we have talked about, and I'm not saying Warrior 3 is going to do that to you or anything, but it's you're talking about those types of movements that can be particularly intense, or maybe even like a back bend or one of those crazy moves I'm not even on the level to be doing. But yoga, certain sports might trigger a dissection in these susceptible individuals, or even, for instance, a sudden neck stretch, which you should never do, never jerk and do anything violently or abruptly. You probably shouldn't do anything violently or abruptly in any type of stretch. It's not really the purpose. Could lead to an inner layer of an artery tearing, which could then lead to this arterial dissection and significant issues that we've discussed.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things you said caught my ear. I know you said don't not do, the warrior pose, yoga, or all the things you love to do, right? We're going to continue to live and play and do all the things we need to do. But I think to your point, it's smart to know the symptoms of something like an arterial dissection or whatnot, especially if we're going to engage in those kind of activities. So how should we be aware of those kinds of symptoms?
Yeah, you got to keep living life, but keep an eye on things like sudden or severe headaches, changes in your vision, dizziness, or unequal pupils. All these things are pretty alarming. The only one I think you wouldn't be able to maybe detect would be the unequal pupils, unless that caused some sort of vision change. But if you're experiencing any of these symptoms after engaging in activities that would involve intense neck movements, just seek medical attention immediately.
Like
think about whiplash motion as well. Those are the types of things that we're looking for here. It's probably the most common type of biomechanical motion that happens in a car crash, particularly a rear end, is that sudden acceleration, deceleration movement of the head and neck area. So something to keep an eye on if you got underlying, or if you're just, a normal person living their life. Big potential for injury.
Yeah, so true. A lot going on inside the body when you're in situations like a car crash or whatnot that you can't see. So very important that we're aware of those symptoms. I think we would be remiss if we don't tap into your legal brain here. So let's kind of shift gears to that side of things, right? Let's talk about some of the legal implications of these delayed kind of neurological complications, in the setting of a personal injury case.
Yeah, the legal implications can be significant, obviously. If someone suffers from an arterial dissection or traumatic aneurysm due to a car crash, it could greatly affect their quality of life and their ability to work. What we do is seeking compensation for what was taken, broken, or what cannot be repaired. We don't live in a world where Old Testament law, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth applies. You don't get to go out and take that from the person who hurt you, but you to be compensated for what was taken from you. And that's just really important to remember. And these things can take a lot from you. These injuries can take a lot from you. But the important thing to know is these types of injuries, they're uncommon or maybe more rare in a car crash. We don't see a lot of this, thank God. Yeah, car crashes are incredibly dangerous. One of the most dangerous things you can do is drive a car, but we don't see a lot of these, and proving that they resulted directly from a car crash can be challenging. It would require detailed medical evidence, expert testimony that would establish a clear link between the trauma and the subsequent vascular disorder, what we call in the legal world causation. Is this approximate cause? Was the car crash approximate cause of the vascular disorder?
You got me thinking there with that, with kind of the invisible nature of some of these injuries, right? I mean, you're in a car crash, you sustain a head injury or a big laceration, a cut on your body. That's pretty obvious, right? But some of these internal injuries like you're talking about here today, you're not seeing those, right? And some of the, like you said, some of the symptoms may take a minute to show up. So that kind of led me to think, well, how is a lawyer going to prove that? You kind of started touching on it a little bit there. Why is it so difficult to prove these injuries in a personal injury case?
It's challenging because arterial dissections and traumatic aneurysms are relatively rare complications of car accidents. We don't see them a lot. So the defense, is paid to argue that the injury could have been caused by other factors, such as pre-existing medical conditions or other unrelated incidents. Maybe taking a lot of different medications, had a lot of things that they were seeing a doctor for before this happened. So to counter this, we're going to need comprehensive medical records, imaging studies, and expert opinions that would demonstrate that the vascular disorder was a likely result of the car accident. And that's not something that medical professionals are typically looking at when these things happen. Causation, that's a medical legal kind of hybrid. So it's the immediate concern, as is when someone's coming in there, it's not, well, how are we going to show that this was a cause of this? It's, well, it doesn't matter. Let's just keep this person from dying. Let's keep them alive and help them and, follow our Hippocratic oath, right? So, that's where the challenge comes in. Is you're not going to be able, in most instances, to have a member of the hospital staff be looking forward and saying, hey, this is why this happened. After the fact, you've got to get someone to evaluate the medical records, speak with the client, and come to their best determination, come to an opinion about what was the cause for that vascular disorder. Because again, it's not going to be immediately apparent sometimes. It's going to be, well, client was involved in a car crash, and then 3 days later, they come into the ER and they have, arterial dissection. Is there going to be an effort by anyone to say, well, we got to make sure this looks good for court, and so let's make sure that's not their concern. So we've got to, be able to link those things if it's believed by the doctor that's why it happened.
I always enjoy your analogies. You kind of put one in my mind, one I've heard and used in talking about a number of things, where you've got this masterpiece painting, right? This big giant masterpiece. But if you walk right up close to it and you look at just one, that's all you see is just one little spot. You've got to back up and get that whole picture view to really appreciate what's going on, right? And then to let your attorney, your medical team connect all the dots and see the whole picture, right? So I can't state enough how important what you just said is to our listeners about really allowing your attorney, your medical team to get access to and really study your entire medical record and start connecting those dots for you to make that case.
Yeah, and that's another concern for the client. The client goes in or the patient goes in, they're not like, well, this happened because of my car crash. They're just like, I've got sudden onset of migraines and, I can't see it. They're not worried about, and so you get a defense attorney going to the jury. Well, you didn't mention when you went in there that this was caused by the car crash, or nobody's thinking about these things. You're not thinking about, how is this going to make my case look? It's a question of, how do I live? How do I avoid dying? How do I avoid having a permanent injury to my brain from what's happened? And it's like, you're, like you said, you're focusing in on that little piece, and you can't be expected as a patient to be able to, okay, I need to give you the full context and be thinking about what some defense attorney is going to ask me someday. It's just survive in advance.
Yeah, I mean, it works the same way on the hospital side. I can't tell you how many times we'd get a patient up to the ICU, and unless you know the whole of the past medical history, it can get a little challenging really making the best decisions on how to treat a particular condition if you've got something that may be contraindicated because of a previous condition. So just knowing that whole thing, like you said, is just so important. And I would say even when you go to the emergency room, like if you start having these headaches, it's not a bad thing to mention that you were in a car wreck maybe 2-3 days ago to your medical team, so they can have that context and also maybe get that in your medical record to your point, as a connector to that potentially. So, communicate, right?
Yeah, the doctors only have the information that you give them in most instances. It's, they're not going to get your medical records. It's hard for us to get medical records in 60 days. Yeah. So, how's the doctor going to have them in 5 minutes when you walk in? They're relying on you to report what happened.
Yeah. Great point. Can you give me an example of why, maybe of a case that, it may have been difficult to prove this injury?
Yeah, if you can imagine a case where a person's involved in a minor car accident, $500 property damage, low property damage as, the insurance industry. We're not here talking about how the car was damaged. We're here talking about the person's body was damaged. And if the car is not damaged, it means probably their body's more damaged because the cars transfer that force into someone's body, but I digress. So minor car accident with low property damage, someone develops an arterial dissection a week later. So the defense could argue that the dissection was caused by an underlying condition like Marfan syndrome, or even a different activity like yoga. Well, they did too much yoga, they stretched their arteries unusually. But the plaintiff's attorney, us, we need to provide compelling medical evidence that show that the dissection was indeed caused by the car accident and not by any other factor. So what did their life look like before this happened? Were they someone who did yoga, 3 times a week with no issues for 5 years? And are there people that can testify to that and then come? And the only thing that changed in this instance would be the car crash. So are we going to say, it was the yoga, which they did for 5 years with no issues, ritualistically over, every single week without exception, even Christmas and holidays? Was it the yoga that did it, or was it this, intervening cause? Was it the car crash? I think in those cases we can say, hey, it's a car crash. That's logical. That's reasonable. It's the only thing that changed. But, that would be an instance where we have to collect and bring that evidence forth to prove our case, because we can't just say, it's definitely the car crash. I mean, we could, but is that compelling? As compelling as the scenario I just laid out to you.
Yeah, so important. I think I'm trying to think. So I'm looking at you. I'm your client. I've gotten you. I've done my part. I've gotten you access to my medical records. I've been upfront about all the treatment I've done since I was injured. You've got all the evidence now. How's this going to impact my personal injury claim?
Detailed medical evidence, documentation is the key essentially to everything. I tell clients all the time is, you got to go to the doctor, and every time you go, you have to honestly tell them everything that's bothering you from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. Don't leave anything out, and don't say anything that's not true, obviously. You just got to give them the information, because if you're talking about it to your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your brother, doesn't matter. It's like it never happened. They don't document things, and your brother's diary probably, could be admissible, but probably not the best type of evidence in these cases, right? So detailed medical evidence can establish a clear connection between the accident and the injury. This can increase your, Mr. Como, your case, and increase the likelihood of a favorable settlement or verdict. It's strong medical evidence, strong documentation. It's crucial to document the injury. If you don't talk about it, it's like it never happened. And its impact from the onset of the case, and that's vital for a strong case. It's just, honestly reporting what's happened to you.
Yeah, you said it. It's funny you said that phrase. If you don't talk about it, it never happened. If it didn't get documented, it never happened. We use that same thing on the healthcare side of things as a nurse documenting. If I didn't do it, if I didn't write a thing down in a medical record, then a court might see that as I never did that thing. So to your point, our clients need to be forthright with you, with you, their attorney, with their doctors. Tell them about everything, all the injured parts, all the things they're experiencing. Because if they don't hear that, then it's not there. So I appreciate that you said that there.
In the immortal words of Denzel Washington from Training Day, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
That's right. Yeah. I love throwing a Denzel reference into it. There it is right there. Cherry on top.
I couldn't remember his name. I wish I could remember. It was Detective something. I don't remember what the Detective.
I can't even now. He's going to make me go back and watch it now. Okay, everybody. I hope you all have found this as fascinating, as enlightening as I have. So to kind of sum it up, between the last episode and this one, we learned about the challenges of diagnosing and treating something like a vascular disorder, like an arterial dissection and traumatic aneurysms after head trauma. If you remember, we also talked about and discussed, significant legal implications in personal injury cases and why proving these injuries can be kind of challenging, really. Thomas, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. Appreciate the time, and appreciate all you do for us.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, as always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Mind Matters. Stay safe, take care of those brains. If you wouldn't mind, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then hit that bell for notifications to stay up to date on our latest content. And as always, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.